In the age of constant comparison and the ever-persistent gaze of the external world, confidence in oneself seems to flicker like a fragile candle in the wind. We are conditioned to seek validation, to measure our worth by the reflections cast in others' eyes. But Friedrich Nietzsche, the radical 19th-century philosopher, proposes a more profound, unsettling, and ultimately liberating conception of self-confidence. One that is not built upon approval or social consensus, but upon a brutal confrontation with one's own becoming. Nietzsche does not hand us self-confidence as a self-help platitude. Instead, he drags us through the dark night of the soul, questions our values, shakes the very foundations of our moral compass, and demands that we forge meaning in a world where there is no inherent meaning. From this abyss, he teaches us that the greatest act of self-confidence is to affirm life as it is, and in doing so to create oneself, to become the individual one is destined to be. Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead is often misunderstood as a mere critique of religion. But at its core, this statement is a recognition of a seismic cultural shift, the collapse of ultimate authority, of objective values handed down from the heavens. Without God, there is no universal moral order, no absolute source of meaning. For many, this void is terrifying. But for Nietzsche, it is also an opportunity. Without an external authority to define our worth, Nietzsche asks, what will you do with your freedom? Self-confidence, in Nietzschean terms, can no longer be based on conformity to divine or societal expectations. It must emerge from within, from the courage to stand alone, to will one's own path, and to create values rather than inherit them. This is the beginning of what Nietzsche calls the path of the Übermensch, the overman or overhuman, a symbol for the fully realized, self-created individual who has transcended herd morality and embraced the full burden of self-determination. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche warns against the dangers of inherited morality. He contends that our moral codes are often disguised forms of control, developed to tame strong individuals and force them into submission. Morality, in this sense, is not truth, it is history, politics, resentment. To build authentic self-confidence, Nietzsche insists, one must be willing to go beyond good and evil. This does not mean becoming immoral or reckless. Rather, it is the confidence to think for oneself, to question the assumptions of one's time, and to risk being misunderstood. The self-confident individual is not one who obediently plays the role assigned by society, but one who dares to transgress, to say yes to life on their own terms. Such confidence requires a fierce inner strength. One must not only rebel against the external world, but also confront one's internalized fears, doubts, and inherited guilt. In this rebellion, Nietzsche sees a kind of spiritual courage, an act of philosophical heroism. It is not arrogance, but the willingness to suffer for one's truth. It is the refusal to live someone else's life. One of Nietzsche's most powerful and often misunderstood concepts is the will to power. Critics have wrongly interpreted it as a desire to dominate others, but Nietzsche was not advocating tyranny. The will to power, at its core, is the innate drive within all life to expand, to assert itself, to overcome resistance, and to grow. It is not about controlling others. It is about realizing one's potential. Self-confidence, then, is not a passive belief in one's abilities. It is an active, dynamic force, a form of power that expresses itself through creation, transformation, and becoming. The confident individual is not static. They are constantly evolving, shaping their destiny, and embracing the eternal struggle that life demands. The will to power is not about security. It is about risk. Nietzsche knew that true self-confidence means stepping into uncertainty, standing in the storm of chaos, and daring to dance. It is about saying yes to the fullness of existence, including suffering, failure, and loss, because through this affirmation, one grows stronger. No exploration of Nietzsche's vision of self-confidence is complete without amor fati, the love of fate. For Nietzsche, the highest form of self-confidence is not merely to endure life's hardships but to love them, to embrace one's destiny in its entirety, without regret or resentment. This is not fatalism. It is radical acceptance. It is the capacity to say, this is my life, and I would live it again, exactly the same, for eternity. This ideal culminates in Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, a thought experiment in which you are asked to imagine living your life over and over again, exactly as it is. Would you recoil in horror, or would you rejoice? The truly self-confident individual, for Nietzsche, is one who can respond with joy. Not because life is easy or perfect, but because they have made peace with its reality. They do not wish to escape life, they embrace it. They do not wish to be someone else, they become who they are. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche offers the haunting command, become who you are. At first, it sounds contradictory. How can one become what one already is? But this paradox reveals Nietzsche's deep insight. We are not born finished. We are not given to ourselves, we must create ourselves. To become who you are is to peel away the layers of conformity, fear, and false identity. It is to confront the shadow, to integrate the chaos within, and to emerge as a whole being. It is a path of suffering and solitude, but also of glory and greatness. Nietzsche understood that such becoming is rare. Most people flee from themselves. They hide behind roles, ideologies, and distractions. They seek comfort over truth, validation over authenticity. But the Nietzschean individual dares to look in the mirror and say, "This is me. I accept the burden of my existence. I will shape my life as a work of art." One of Nietzsche's most consistent themes is the necessity of solitude. He believed that true confidence cannot be found in the crowd. The individual must withdraw, reflect, and wrestle with their own soul. Solitude is not loneliness, it is spiritual preparation. In solitude, one is stripped of pretense. One encounters the raw chaos of one's desires, the abyss of meaninglessness, the whisper of inner truth. Most flee from this confrontation, but the Nietzschean spirit faces it head-on and emerges reborn. Self-confidence, therefore, is not simply the ability to speak loudly or act boldly. It is the quiet courage to know oneself deeply, to endure oneself, and to live according to that inner knowledge, even when the world resists. In many ways, Nietzsche was the philosopher of nihilism, the condition in which life seems to lack meaning, purpose, or value. He saw nihilism not as a catastrophe, but as a necessary stage of spiritual growth. The destruction of false idols opens the space for authentic creation. To be self-confident in Nietzsche's sense is to stand amidst the ruins of old certainties and still affirm life. It is to say, even if there is no given meaning, I will create meaning. It is to become the artist of one's own existence. This is not easy. It requires the strength to face despair without succumbing to it. It demands the audacity to invent one's own values, to live as if life matters, because one has chosen to make it matter. Friedrich Nietzsche does not offer us a comfortable path to self-confidence. He offers us a mountain. He calls us to climb, not because it is safe, but because it is necessary. The Nietzschean individual does not wait to be granted self-worth. They claim it, they create it, they earn it through suffering, solitude, and self-overcoming. To be self-confident, in Nietzsche's terms, is not to be perfect or unshakable. It is to be becoming. It is to dance on the edge of chaos, to love one's fate, to create new values, and to become who one is. In a world that often demands conformity, Nietzsche calls us to rebellion. In a time of noise, he calls us to silence. In a culture of surface, he calls us to depth. And in the face of despair, he calls us not to surrender, but to rise. So, let us not ask how to feel confident. Let us ask, what are we becoming? What mountain are we climbing? What values are we creating? In answering these questions, we may discover not only confidence, but greatness. Thank you for accompanying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so we can discuss. Wish you and your family good health.